The flaw with the law of attraction is that most people just sit back and wait for it to manifest. If you visualize an income, it doesn't just show up. You've got to do something to get the income. That's the key. The problem with visualizations that most people have is they come up with a picture of what they want for their life, but then they take no action towards it. Now, Tony Robbins, great success coach, said, you need to learn to have a bias towards action. Take an action. Know what your goal is, but then immediately take an action. And then he talks about massive action plans, and that's all great. And then he says you get an education, you course correct, you keep focusing on your goal. I do agree that most people who visualize do not take enough action. I 100% agree with that. Most people who are, particularly the CEOs, we actually have a bias towards more of the visualization and the strategy, but not actually taking action. CEOs typically don't actually get their hands dirty. Most people think to become a CEO, you have to take a lot of action. I don't actually think that's true. Become a COO, you have to take a lot of action. I came up as an entrepreneur who was taking a lot of action, but my wife is the one who's actually action oriented. And if you look at my personality, I've done a ton of personality assessment. My personality is much more vision, strategy, focus, and the actual results and the actions are far down on my list. But that doesn't mean if you're a solopreneur or a small firm that you cannot take action. You must condition yourself to take action. But when you get to the point where you have 200 employees, I can't act. I can't do that. I have to tell other people to act because I delegate everything. I have to. The only thing that I don't delegate, obviously reviewing financials, my actual meetings with my managers and giving them feedback, and recruiting. I do the recruiting myself with the key people, because I really am trying to get my vision and my culture in there. So those are 3 or 4. And setting the vision and strategy is really the most important job of a CEO. But that's not, quote, action. That's not actually doing the work. People get stuck in doing the work, providing the services, instead of taking a step back and building the system that will do it for you. Talking about the flaws of visualization. We have faith, and we think we have faith, and we have these inner beliefs that are contradictory to our faith. So that's the first hump we have to overcome. You've got to come up with the belief that you can get there, right? You have to believe it. And when the visualization experts talk about this, they say, relax, go into a positive mental state, and then believe that you will achieve whatever the picture is of whatever that, and make it vivid and make yourself emotionally bought in. And I agree with all that stuff. But the flaw with the law of attraction is that then basically most people just sit back and wait for it to manifest. And that is absolute BS. It does not just manifest. You got to go out and you got to do something to bust your butt. The next question's got to be, how do I provide the service to make the money to get the thing? That's the key. You've got to provide a service to get that income. If you visualize an income, it just doesn't just show up. You've got to do something to get the income. And so I know I'm contradicting one of my earlier statements about taking action and what your bias is towards. The action may be, how do I build a company that makes $100 million a year? That's legit, but building a company is the action then at that point. And how do I coach my people so they can hit these revenue targets? I believe visualization is a form of prayer. So prayer, you begin when you pray, you have to have a belief of what God has for you. That's faith. So it's all circular. And you come up with a vision for what it is, and then you say, God, I'm declaring this for myself. And then you got to go into the next step, which is the action, coming up with the plan and taking the actions. And that is, what does that person look like? What do I need to do to get there? And then write that down, and then start doing that. And then review that every couple of days or a week. And then that's called feedback. And sometimes it's okay to change the goal, but I rather change the time that the goal is due than change the actual goal. Because if you get to December 31st, you haven't made the money, you got to say, okay, by March 31st or whatever it is. But focusing on this, a couple of key steps. You get the vision, you focus, you go in the positive mental state, do that, visualize it, that's fine. But then you got to ask yourself, what do I do to get there? And that's actually the important question that's left lacking in most of these self-help systems where they talk about the law of attraction or manifestation or all this stuff. So a lot of people, they're waiting there. Compensation is tied to the service provided. So you've got to figure out a way to provide the service to make that money. One question is, how do I grow or how do I scale then to say $100 million? I'm only making $20,000 a year. I would recommend to you don't start with the goal of $100 million. I started with the goal of $1.2 million, and it took me 12 years actually to get my first million. And I focused on that. And then I doubled it. And I said, okay, now it's going to be 2.4. And then it was 5, and then 10. And then 20, 25, 50, and now it's 100. You have to say a large number that you can believe it, but it stretches your faith. But if you start out trying to say, I have a $100 million company, to me at least, that seems so extraordinarily unlikely that you can't see it for yourself, that your inner dialogue will shut you down, and you probably won't even realize it, that you're like, you'll never have it, or begin to create barriers to that. We sometimes create our own barriers to our success because, as I said, there's the air conditioner too, that as we get more successful, we shut ourselves down because it's scary to be successful. And if you believe that everybody successful did something illegal, that's a huge challenge to becoming successful. Very huge challenge. And so you've got to incrementally do it. Don't start off with $100 million. Start off with $1 million or 500,000 or whatever the number that you can believe but is a stretch for your faith. And then you go up from there. And I would even change it a little bit more to say, how can I provide $500,000 worth of service? That's actually a really great question, because it isn't about how much money you're going to make, it's about how much service you can provide. And again, the money comes in relationship to the services you provide. It just does. So if you're a web designer, how do I provide $100 million of web design services? That's probably too much for people, unless the government is a contract, right? Let's take it down to $1 million. How to provide $1 million in web services? How do I be the best at providing $1 million in web services? I've asked myself these questions. How do I become the best personal injury law firm possible? And my first answer to that question is love your clients more than anyone else and work for your clients like it's more important than yourself. And so our first core value is service to the clients. When people talk to me about what I think customer service is, they think I'm a freaking fanatic. Like I was like, you got to bleed for your clients. And I don't know every firm in the country, but I do know that I bleed for my clients a lot more than everybody else does. My wife was an immigrant when she came over the border at 14. And I get angry when we settle a case for less money than I know we could have. Why? Because my wife was poor. I was poor growing up. So it really matters to me to get every dollar from my clients, because that can make a difference in their lives. They may lose their home, or their kid may not be able to go to school. Something would happen, so every dollar matters. I've got all the trappings of success. $500 extra doesn't matter to me as a take-home amount, but it matters to my client. And so nobody cares more about that than I do. And so that's one of the things when you talk about how do you get to be the best in the business, really think about it. How do you deliver the best service? Number 2 core value is service to my team. How do I create an environment where everyone here knows that everyone else has their back? You start with core values, and we know our core values. When we hire people, they know what our core values are. And if I see somebody not living up to those core values, I tell them, and if they don't fix it, then they get offboarded. And it sounds harsh, but we just last year won the best place to work in South Florida for mid-sized companies. Top of all industries, not just lawyers, of all industries. How do you do that? We live our core values for real. And I really believe that. So service to my team. And then the 3rd core value is service to the community. I give back with passion. We provided more than 10 full scholarships to underprivileged kids to go to college. And that's just the tip. We've raised over $500,000 for cancer research. We've built orphanages and schools in Latin and South America and churches. It's really important to me to do this stuff. That passion for that thing. And you ask yourself, how can I give the best service possible as a web design company or as a landscaping company or whatever it is? Just ask yourself that question and then do it. And then keep doing that until it really becomes part of your fiber of your being. When I get up, I don't have to worry about whether I'm going to put my clients first. I've been doing it for so long, I know it's going to happen. And I know my people who are my key managers, they know that too. And they know the decisions we have to make. And so when people get into real trouble and they have really big cases and their family is on the line, they come to us because they just know. We've done it in the past. How do you balance the service to the clients versus, say, service to the team? There's a couple different groups of people who need to have assistance of a personal injury lawyer. One of the types of people is someone who they get into the crisis of a personal injury accident, they lose their job, they have a serious medical condition, and so therefore they become very difficult to deal with because they're in crisis. And these are not people who have a lot of money in the bank and they can weather it. They're living paycheck to paycheck, and so this could be one of those events that gets you homeless. And so they get very afraid, and lawyers don't have a great reputation already, so we're saying, trust us, we can work this out for you. So they're not trusting us a lot, and they call every day, and they're very aggressive. My team is trained to deal with that because we know that's going to be a problem. We know that's going to be an issue. The other category of similarly situated, but I believe different, is the group that either one, believe they are entitled to an outrageous amount of compensation for relatively minor injuries, and or while they may be afraid, they channel that fear into threats to us. And so that group of people, we get rid of them pretty quickly as clients. And maybe I'm a hypocrite for this, but the truth is, if you think you're entitled to something, look, I'm not going to be able to help you because you're always going to believe you're entitled to more than I can get for you. The legal system has rules and limits. And the people who are threatening, I will give them one chance. And I usually have this conversation. We've got several thousand clients. It's rare that this happens, but if somebody threatens, we record all calls, so we listen to the call and I hear what was said. I'll call the client in and I'll say, listen, we're doing our best for you. You said something that was very threatening. And I want to be clear that we won't continue to represent you if you continue to act like this. If you're upset about something, it's on me. I'm the one who's responsible for it. So certainly don't ever threaten the paralegal or the person who's working for you. It's about me. And if you have a problem with me, we can come in and we can talk about it. But if you do this again, I'm going to discharge you as a client. I've never had a problem after that, actually. A couple times when I have people who have mental illness, but that's in our society. Actually, there's a lot of people with mental illness issues, and it's just, we can't help them. And that's, unfortunately, I can't help everybody. Good friend of mine, this guy, Irvin Gonzalez, he passed away. He said, if you're going to be a plaintiff's lawyer, and really in any business, he said, there's only a certain number of people you can bring onto your boat. Everyone's in the ocean drowning. You can only bring a certain number of people on your boat or else they'll sink you. So sometimes you got to just throw somebody a life preserver. One of the big questions that small businesses come up with is, how do you build the culture around the values? We have core values: service to the client, service to the team, service to the community are our top 3 core values. There's another core value called accountability. And that's really the engine that drives everything. And I screen for this when I hire people. I say, give me some examples where you have not followed through with something. I ask them the question straight out because they say they've always followed through with something. I know that's not true. Everybody makes mistakes. And then I ask if you ever had to manage somebody who hasn't delivered. One of the most powerful tools we can use in this area of accountability is Sudoku. Say what you're going to do what you're going to say, communicate the minute it's not going to happen. And so we use that as a very powerful tool. And we also have what's called a feedback conversation where you have to invite permission and say, hey, can I give you some feedback? What do you think went well with this client? What do you think went poorly with this client? What would you do differently in the future? And people mostly know what they did wrong. And it's very easy for them. And if it comes from their mouth, say, okay, yeah, I agree with that. So let's make sure that happens next time. And then maybe next time you got to have the conversation again. And the next time, hopefully they'll get it. But you can't be emotional about it. You can't be blaming. If they get defensive, you didn't get the permission or they don't respect you, or maybe they just can't take accountability and they're not the right fit for the organization. So you've got to love your people. You got to respect your people, but you got to insist they respect you too and your processes. Not every client is the best client. And so we still have to serve people who aren't necessarily the best clients. But we want to give the best clients 110% core. But we also want to manage expectations and create systems and processes for helping us to deal with the cases that aren't the catastrophic cases or the massive big cases. As a CEO or president or even a manager in a company, you don't want to have to be making the calls on all decisions in your firm. You want to create a system that allows other people to do it. And then you got to enforce the system. And this is where a lot of business people make a mistake. I'm sure all of you have heard work on the business, not in the business. And that really means you don't do the work yourself. You get other people to do the work. The mistake I see a lot of lawyers making is they want to do everything themselves. And I said, there's a lot of stuff you don't need. You have a legal secretary. She should type the stuff up for you. You shouldn't be typing your own stuff up, or else you don't need a legal secretary or a legal assistant. You've got to do what you need to do and only do what you need to do as a lawyer, right? Talk to the client, answer certain answers, go to depositions, go to court. You don't need to be doing the grunt work of calling up to get medical records from a hospital. That's not your job. There's a paralegal to do that. And a lot of lawyers will still do that, and it's incredibly inefficient. And so they're really losing money and they don't realize it. And by the way, if your people don't do it right, that's a training issue and that's an accountability issue. And that's on you to have a better accountability conversation with that.
If you want to work with someone who's already been through there, give me a call, follow me on Instagram. We have plenty of content that will help you grow your business, and we look forward to seeing you at the top.